Hey everybody, welcome on in to Dead Cinema Society. My name is Tyler. This is my co-host Nick, and today we're going to be discussing Dune Part 2. So, Nick, the moment you saw this movie, you texted me and you were freaking out about how great this movie was.
Yeah,
Um,
it's definitely an achievement,
yeah.
just from a technical standpoint. What Denis Villeneuve was able to accomplish here was incredible.
Yeah,
Um,
so let's talk like first 10 minutes, maybe no spoilers because I'm
yeah,
sure
we're
there's a lot of people who haven't seen it yet.
it is
So
opening weekend.
yeah. So what
Which,
was right off the bat, what stood out to you most about this film?
I think the main thing is just how visually stunning it is. It does a very good job of visual storytelling and almost making Arrakis a character because of how it is featured and shot. Cinematographer, let me pull up my list of names here. Uh, Cinematographer Greg Fraser, who has worked on a lot of other stuff I really like. He is just absolutely at the top of his game here. The whole movie, you can basically take out any frame and print it and hang it on your wall. Like, it's a very beautiful film.
It is gorgeous. And I'm glad you brought up that point about Arrakis, like feeling like a character. I because I feel the same way as far as it is a whole new world, and we spend like 95% of Dune Part 1 and then Part 2 on this planet, and we with all the screen time Arrakis gets, we are still learning something about it, like, every
Yeah,
time. And the visuals definitely aid in that. Like, there are several scenes when you see the spice just like glittering,
yeah,
and it's
just
just like,
coming off the
God,
dunes.
it's
Yeah,
amazing.
and
It's so beautiful.
another point that I just thought of right now about how we spend so much time on Arrakis, it does a very good job of still feeling like it's a galaxy spanning saga
Hmm.
without really leaving Arrakis all that much.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you spend so much of your film in one specific location, it can almost like condense the world around it.
Hmm.
But this movie is able to balance that out while still spending almost all of our time on Arrakis. It still feels like it's part of a larger universe.
Yeah. I'll say, as far as like, non-spoiler things that really stood out to me, the sound design for these
Oh yeah,
movies have just been absolutely incredible. I find that like anytime there's a machine whirring, just working through the sound of the sand, the way the music mixes with
especially with the
the environment.
sandworms. Like,
Yes.
it really brings you into it with the sound design on those.
Yeah, this is something that I fully expect. They're going to get Oscar nods for visuals and sound as well as
Oh yeah,
costume. The whole 9 yards. This will get a lot of Oscar
and
nominations.
deservedly so. Like,
Hmm.
I can't think of another movie that is as technically sound.
Yeah.
Um, everybody brought their A game, and you have a lot of professionals on that movie that have worked on other great movies, and just bringing their A game to
Hmm.
this one, really everything worked.
So one thing I want to touch on is Denis has become my favorite director, actively
Yeah,
working in Hollywood right now. I feel like every time he puts out a movie, he just does not miss, and we're getting,
yeah,
you know, top of the top, like a report card style movies, A plus every single time he sends something to the cinemas. So it started with, or for me, with Blade Runner 2049, which I've mentioned many times. That is my
yeah.
favorite movie of all time at this point. And so he does that. He's got Arrival, Dune Part 1 and 2 now, and I just feel like this guy is, in my opinion, the best in Hollywood at the moment.
Yeah, he definitely is up there for me. I always had him as a director I really liked and appreciated because
Mhm.
he does make great movies, but he wasn't quite in that tier with like a Chris Nolan or a Wes Anderson for me
Mhm.
until this movie. This is where he kind of like ascended, in my opinion,
Yeah.
to that like directors I'm gonna watch anything they put out level.
Mhm.
Um, his he knocked it out of the park on this one. And I liked his other work too. Like Arrival, I feel like was a movie that was kind of done dirty by the marketing
Mm-hmm.
because it was marketed as like a thriller, you know, monster movie,
Yeah.
but in reality, it's just a couple hours of watching people figuring out legit linguistics, which I actually enjoyed.
Yeah.
But,
I will say the twist toward the end of Arrival just got me so good. But that's
oh
when I
yeah,
knew I was like, when I first finished watching that film, I was like, who is this guy? I got to find out who this director is. And so I've been a fan
yeah,
ever since I've found out who Denis was, and I feel like this is hopefully only the beginning, that he continues to get projects like this. He's clearly shown an absolute mastery of sci-fi, and
oh
with
yeah,
Dune and I guess in a sense Blade Runner adaptation. Now Blade Runner, he created an original story, obviously with input from Ridley Scott and co.
yeah.
um to extend that universe, but with Blade Runner, this is a pure, or sorry, with Dune, this is a pure adaptation. And I have not heard hardly any fans who have had issues with it.
So for me, when it comes to adaptation, because you're never going to put something that's one to one on the screen,
Mhm.
whether it's because there's just too much or you need to change something because he did make a few changes, some relatively large changes, but he was able to maintain the themes, and that's what's
Yeah.
important to me when it comes to adaptation. Like if you look at Lord of the Rings, which pretty much everybody agrees is a great adaptation, there are massive sections of the book that are missing, such as the
Mhm.
Scouring of the Shire, Tom Bombadil, who's my personal favorite book character, so I was a little upset about that one, but they still were able to nail the themes,
Yeah.
and that's what really took them to that level of where they were, just nailing the themes.
Mhm.
And I think that Denny does a very good job of nailing the themes in Dune, the themes of terrible purpose, religious fanaticism, the whole prophecy being self fulfilling, even if it is a false prophecy.
Yeah.
There's still the power of prophecy. And he also expanded a few areas that the books really didn't go into with more Benny Jesuits, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
the Bene Gesserit, like, that whole I guess like subsect of people in this world, I find absolutely fascinating, and to me that's
yeah,
probably the strongest plot point of the series for me. I really enjoy it. I find myself captivated anytime they're on screen, just because of the power they hold and the
yeah.
gravitas, especially in relation to how they particularly are driving these plots forward.
Yeah,
I
because they're plans within plans. They always
Yeah.
have so many things going on. And then speaking of Benny Jesuits, Rebecca Ferguson is just incredible in this movie.
Mhm.
Um, like there's a particular scene where I got chills in the theater because of her delivery, which we'll get
Yes.
into in the spoiler section. But
Oh, yes.
yeah, her character was very, very interesting in this movie.
Mhm.
And as a whole, I mean, all the actors brought it. Um,
Yes.
I was somewhat concerned when Timothy Chalamet was cast originally for Dune because I never doubted that he could play Paul Atreides because the Duke's son Paul Atreides, but I wasn't sure if he had the gravitas and
Mhm.
the menace to play Muad'Dib
Mhm.
because it is almost like they're two different characters, but he really pulled it off.
Yeah, and I can see that concern for sure.
Yeah,
When we really get into the meat of this film, I think Timothy does exactly what you're talking about, as far as like having that screen presence, that gravitas to
yeah,
just be a menacing and believable figure in that role. And I mean, Timothy, along with everyone, acting has to be one of the strongest points of this film
oh,
for sure.
absolutely. And I would like to point out Javier Bardem as
Mhm.
Stilgar. He's an actor who I've been kind of critical of in the past because I feel like he's turned in some pretty wooden performances. But
Yeah.
man, he killed it. Like you could just feel the fanaticism coming from him. Um,
I felt a lot of the and this movie doesn't have many, but some of the few comedic moments felt so natural, but
oh
they were
yeah,
delivered from Javier's character Stilgar, and just man, I love him for that. Just the performance he gave us gave me a character that I think I will treasure forever.
oh
I
yeah. I
absolutely
think
love Stilgar.
he's probably my favorite character in the film.
Mhm.
Honestly, he just really killed it in this one.
Yeah. Well, so I think let's get into some spoiler talk here. So
Okay.
if you haven't seen the movie, you should go watch it and then come back.
Yeah, definitely go see it and go see it on the biggest screen you can.
Yeah.
It takes full advantage of the IMAX experience.
Yeah, so
Um,
that was my first viewing experience. I went and saw it in IMAX and man, it was great. My seat was rumbling. I mean, the whole the whole room was filled with the screen and it was quite an experience.
yeah,
It was incredible.
yeah, they're really using just every decibel of that sound system and every inch of that screen.
Yeah. And
But
what's great is that like I've been in some IMAX situations where it's like, the theater's super loud and everything kind of gets jarbled. But again, credit to the sound team. Everything felt really clear. There was like maybe one or two lines where I wasn't quite sure what somebody was saying.
yeah,
Um, but oftentimes it was something that was intentionally whispered by the characters. Uh,
and that's actually a nitpick that I kind of had with part one.
hmm
I watched part one at home because it was peak COVID
Yeah.
and day and date release on Max, so I just saw it on HBO. But there was a lot of times in the first one where I would find myself raising and lowering the volume of my TV to hear people talk and not be blasted by sound in the next scene.
Yeah.
And that issue definitely got solved here.
hmm
Um, but
So I wanna highlight one of the opening sequences in this film when the Harkonnen troops are out and we've got Jessica and Paul out in the desert.
oh
And
yeah,
so
with the red effect and
yeah,
yeah, that was insane.
Paul takes on some of these troops and it's some skilled fighting like we mentioned.
Yeah, the fight choreography in this was incredible. Um, a lot of movies you can kind of fall into movies with good choreography usually fall into one or two camps. You have on the one end, you have the more choreographed spectacle like the Star Wars prequels.
Mhm.
And then on the other end, you just have very brutalistic, just obviously two people trying to kill each other. Like, I can't think of a
I
good
think
example off the top of my head,
I think
but
like Jack Reachers stuff like that.
yeah, like Reacher, stuff like that. And this movie did a very good job of, making it look choreographed. Like you have people who are extremely well trained while keeping the brutality.
Mhm.
Because you could feel it when they were fighting. Like it's very raw. Um, but yeah, I love the choreography, especially the knife fight at the end with Fade Rafa.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's very clear that they trained a lot for that, and it
they
was worth it.
certainly did. I
They actually apparently the first time that Austin Butler and Timothy Chalamet met was at the weapons training place. So they said they met, and then about 2 minutes later, they were trying to kill each other.
That's awesome. I love that.
But, yeah.
That sounds like a great beginning to a strong friendship.
Oh, absolutely.
But back to that opening sequence, one of the things that stood out to me there was after Paul had done his thing, and then we had one Harkonnen trooper left at the top of the dune, and he pulls up his gun. He's ready to
Yeah,
take Paul out, and then out of nowhere, Jessica just comes up and smashes the dude with a rock. And it was particularly like the ferocity in
yeah,
her face that stood out to me. I was like, Jessica is savage here. She's got a sort of menace to her that you just don't see in a lot of like motherly characters because we
yeah,
definitely feel that mothering instinct from her, but she is ferocious.
yeah.
Um
Very much so.
and it's like
Um,
after the first hit, she knocked him down, like bashed in his face shield, and then just kept going. And I was like, oh man.
yeah, like she was letting out some serious anger
Yeah.
there.
And then she was like, "How many times have I told you about leaving your back to the open?"
But
It's just like she's still got an
oh,
upper hand here.
And the other thing about that whole sequence was the eclipse just looked beautiful, but that scene where the Harkonnen soldiers are going up
Mhm.
the cliff face, I think that that was incredible. Like that was one of the most
Yes.
beautiful things I've seen in
I
cinema.
loved that. Just
Yeah.
these, I guess these anti-grav suits. I'm not sure what
Yeah.
they're called in the world, but the way those work on screen, I think is
Yeah,
just
it just
perfect.
looks so cool.
Yeah.
Um and then from there, so we got the first opening sequence
Hmm.
and at the very beginning of the movie, when it opens with power over spice is power over all, and the um, Sadakar throat singing chant.
Yeah.
I heard that the Sadakar throat singing chants are actually in the Sadakar language, but with the vowels removed. So they're actually saying something to the other Sadakar through those chants.
So
Um,
it's what, like English without the vowels or something else?
so the Sardaukar language, they basically came up with it by taking English and just kind of running it through 1,000 filters
Okay.
until it got to something completely alien sounding. But the chant they have is their language with just vowels removed.
Ah.
So they're communicating in secret, kind of.
See, and I love that opening chant. It sets
Yeah,
the tone immediately. It's very like I'm
it's
not sure what the word is. It's disturbing. It's ethereal. I
yeah,
mean,
it just feels otherworldly.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think it, like you said, it sets the tone because a lot of people who have read Dune, I think, kind of come away with the wrong message
Hmm.
that Paul is the hero of the story. Paul's not really the hero of the story. He's a tragic figure. And it's almost seeing what he has to become to be the Kwisatz Haderach. It's almost like watching Anakin Skywalker become Darth Vader without the costume change.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm glad you bring that up because one of the things that like stood out to me early in the movie is that Paul, like, he's trying to be sincere, but it's like we find out that what he really wants is revenge.
yeah,
And at the same time, he's disgusted with like the Bene Gesserit propaganda, as he calls it. These prophecies that they basically
yeah,
sown into this culture, for centuries. But I think he knows, but he doesn't want to accept yet that he's going to have to embrace that to get what he wants.
yeah. And it comes down to something we were talking about a bit before we went on here, but we don't get a lot of what he wants in this movie. You
Yeah.
know, we get a lot of what he wants to avoid,
Mm-hmm.
which is the holy war and billions dying. But
Yep.
we don't really get a lot of what his end game is outside of that one time he says revenge.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
it
It,
almost seems like at a certain point he doesn't even want revenge. He just wants to be Fremen.
mm-hmm.
Um, and then, things happen and he's forced to go down the path. But yeah, I think we could have gotten a little bit more of what he actually wants in the
I
movie.
Yeah, no, I feel like there was probably about a good hour and 15 or so of this film where it's mostly just Paul assimilating into the
Yeah,
Fremen culture, which is right up my alley. I love films like that. Dances with Wolves is like one of those that's at the top of my list. Um, Avatar: The Way of Water. I did not expect to like that movie that much, but
I still
it's
haven't seen that one.
it's
But
well, it struck such a chord with me because it's another assimilation story, and I
yeah,
don't know why. I've always been a big fan of other cultures. I've been fascinated by the differences in cultures, and so assimilation stories always kind of like they really pique my interest. And so that's one thing that I personally love about this film is that we get to see all the different ways that the Fremen do things, and Paul
yeah,
is sincerely trying to be Fremen throughout this film, and I think you're right. I think that like it's an unspoken desire of his that he just wants to be Fremen,
yeah,
but he also still wants revenge underneath it all, and he's going to use that to his advantage, like however he can, by naturally attuning himself to the ways of the Fremen.
yeah. There was one other thing I wanted to bring up about that, but I had completely escaped my mind.
I'll tell you
But
one thing that like kind of it really shocked me, honestly, was when they took Jamis's water to the, I guess, the Well of Souls, like the sacred well,
Yeah,
and Stilgar takes Jessica there. She's like, "Why are you showing me this?" And he talks to her. He says 38 million decaliters in this, in this well. And then he, kind of a throwaway line. If you're not paying attention, I missed it the first time, but I caught it the second time I watched it. He said that we have 1,000 such places. And I was like, what? You have
yeah,
a thousand such places of 38 million decaliters on this planet, and it's so barren for water. And I'm just thinking, like, they have so much water underground. Like, is there some
and
plot point to this at some point? Because he does mention about how, like, when it's
well,
full.
so the Fremen's end game has
Hmm.
always been to kind of terraform Dune.
Yeah.
Because Dune was once like a lush green world with
Hmm.
trees and oceans and all that. So they want that to return.
Yeah.
Um, and the Bene Gesserit religious conditioning that they put into place, a lot of it has to do with waiting because the Fremen are basically like a knife that the Bene Gesserit created just in case they might need it someday.
Hmm.
They did something very similar with the Emperor Sardaukar. They
Okay.
create these just harsh environments that are able to breed excellent warriors. Like the planet of the Sardaukar, whose name is escaping me right now, it is a truly awful, awful place. And because it's such an awful place, only the strong can come from it, because
Okay.
anybody who's weak will die.
This
And it kind
makes
of
a lot of
conditions
sense.
them. Yeah, so the Bene Gesserit set up Dune as a place where the Fremen could basically be Sardaukar, and they put these prophecies in place about waiting for someone from the outer worlds. So if they ever needed to, get the Fremen, like let's say the Sardaukar turned on them, they
Ah,
could go get the Fremen, and they have an army of the most elite fighters in the galaxy.
very convenient. The voice from the outer world.
Yeah, so that's the whole reason they set up the prophecy of
Yeah.
Dune will be terraformed when the one comes.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's their whole goal.
Yeah, so and that makes sense. If they have that much water, at some point they'd be able to
Yeah,
use it.
yeah. So they want to get the planet terraformed. And I won't give any book spoilers on that because that's a couple books down the line.
Yeah. But I mean, so that really stood out to me. It's just like, man, water
Yeah,
is so precious and so sacred, and yet
and
they're
there's so
housing it
much of it that
underground.
they wouldn't even drink it if they were dying of dehydration,
Yeah.
because the religious training is just so strong, and that's what
Hmm.
creates the fanaticism that he's able to utilize. Um,
More on Jessica. Like, not long after that, we learn that their reverend mother is dying, and he's like, "Hey, we need you to take her place." And
yeah,
so she doesn't really see another option.
yeah. I
There's a
mean,
funny
there
line
really
from
isn't
Paul
one.
about that.
Yeah.
But,
Um,
gosh, that old reverend mother who's dying is absolutely terrifying.
oh yeah, no, that was a terrifying experience.
I
Yeah.
love whoever they cast to do that. She just played it perfectly. And there was this
Oh
one
yeah,
part when they were giving her the water of life, and she just has this creepy smile that,
yeah.
comes in, and I'm just like, man, she absolutely knocked it out of the park on this.
And then when she realizes that Jessica is pregnant, the delivery of that just she's pregnant. What have we done? That was
Yeah.
really good as well.
So, fill me in on that. I'm still working my way through the first book. Is that too much of a spoiler for the book series to as to
Um,
why that's an issue for them?
Not really. I mean, as far as I can remember, it's never like super clearly stated in the books why it's such a big issue.
Mhm.
But basically, she becomes an abomination. She becomes what they call, I think it's like twice born or something,
The baby?
where,
Yeah.
yeah, basically her full mind is awoken and given the memories of, the thousands of reverend mothers that came before her, before she's
Ah.
even born. So in the books, instead of being just a couple months between the fall of House Atreides and Paul squaring off with the Emperor, it's
Mhm.
actually a couple years. So Aaliyah is a toddler in the book that speaks and acts like a grown woman,
Yeah.
and just very unsettling. She makes people super uncomfortable because of how she is, and that's why they call her Abomination.
That makes sense.
Um, yeah, and that's probably the biggest change from the books,
Hmm.
shortening it up and removing Aaliyah, because Aaliyah is a very important book character, um, which I assume, since they cast Anya Taylor-Joy, that she'll be in the third one.
Yeah.
Now, if they do follow the same chronology between the first and second book, because both part one and part two are all one book,
Hmm.
there's about a 10-year gap between Dune and Dune Messiah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if they're going to lengthen that, because Anya Taylor Joy is clearly not a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
I
so
thought
I'm
that
not
was
sure how
her
they'll
when she
handle
showed
that.
up on the
Yeah,
screen.
yeah, yeah.
I thought so.
Um, yeah, what a move to cast an actress of that caliber to deliver one line.
I know, for real. I'm sure she got paid pretty heftily
Oh yeah,
for that
and
too.
Aaliyah is massive in the books that come after. So
Yeah.
depending on how far Denny wants to take this, she
Hmm.
could have a huge, huge part.
So
Um,
I want us to talk a little bit about the Kwisatz Haderach
yeah.
for a moment, because as somebody who hasn't read the book probably is unsure of, like, okay, what's this term they're throwing around? And I know Muad'Dib is, like, Paul's Fremen name at some point, and then we've got the Lisan al Gaib, the voice from the outer world. Um, but the Kwisatz Haderach, you want to explain a little bit about that?
So basically, another change from the book, Mentats, the human computers, because there was this whole thing. It's called the Bucklerian Jihad, where humanity rose up against computers and AI and got rid of them all. And then to replace computers, because they still needed to do the complex calculations of interstellar travel,
Hmm.
they started training people as Mentats. And Mentats are basically human computers. You can see a bunch of them standing around when the Harkonnens are doing their stuff. They're the guys who are chanting because they're doing calculations.
Hmm.
Um, and Paul is trained as a Mentat in the book. He's not a full Mentat, but he has Mentat training.
Hmm.
And then his mother, against the will of the Bene Gesserit, because he was supposed to be a daughter,
Yep.
they wanted Paul to be a daughter, so that bloodline, because a lot of what the Bene Gesserits do is basically a selective breeding program to try to get this
Yep.
Kwisatz Haderach. And Paul was supposed to be a daughter, but what ended up happening is Lady Jessica, because she loved the Duke Leto, gave him the son that he wanted,
Hmm.
and that kind of threw off the plans of the Bene Gesserit. But by him receiving Mentat training and Bene Gesserit training from his mother, when he drinks the water of life, it unlocks his mind,
Hmm.
and the Bene Gesserit and the Mentat and all of that just kind of come together to make him a supercomputer.
Yep.
Like, he can see the future because he has all of the memories of the past and can analyze them like a Mentat.
Hmm.
So he can kind of project the future,
Yep.
and he creates a power that really hasn't been seen before by being able to do that. And his mind is just very powerful.
And from
Um,
what I understand, the Bene Gesserit, they're purposefully trying to bring about this Kwisatz Haderach.
yes, but they
It's a
want to bring about one that they can control.
yes.
So that's why they're so terrified of Paul becoming it, because they can't control him.
Hmm.
Whereas if Fade Raltha, who was also very close to being able to be the Kwisatz Haderach,
Hmm.
if he had been the Kwisatz Haderach, they would have been able to control him more easily than Paul. So that's why they kind of want him to win over Paul.
Yep.
But yeah,
There was okay, so about midway through the movie, Paul gets his name Muad'Dib,
yeah,
or he chooses his Fremen, fighter name. He's given the name Usul, which means like strong,
yeah. It
the
means
base of a
base of the pillar.
yeah,
Yeah,
the base of the pillar, which I thought was really cool. And then he chose the kangaroo mouse, the word for that, Muad'Dib. And so throughout the rest of the film, he's referred to as such. But I thought that this was one of the For me, it was honestly like a very heartwarming scene during the movie.
Yeah.
I felt like a lot of pride. I was like, "Way to go, Paul! Like this is awesome."
I almost kind of see it with a little bit of malice now, though,
Hmm.
because I was thinking about it. He knows the name of the kangaroo mouse.
Yeah,
So I think he might have been choosing that on purpose
yeah,
to be the one who leads the way and go into the prophecies more.
yeah. And see that would not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Um,
And once again, we kind of it almost feels like he doesn't have a ton of agency in this movie because we don't really know what he wants
yeah.
outside of just revenge
Hmm.
and not to cause the deaths of billions. If we could have gotten a little bit more of that, I think I would have enjoyed it a bit more. And I did love the
Yeah.
movie, so these are just nitpicks.
I think if they could have shown that like Paul knew what he was doing in that moment,
Yeah,
like he was kind of manipulating the room,
yeah,
um, that I think that point would have been driven home a little bit more, for
yeah.
sure.
I mean, in the first movie, he even has a like a tape on the Muad'Dib mouse
Hmm.
open at one point.
Yeah.
So I doubt he had to ask for the name of it.
No, you're right, and that's where like watching these films back to back is definitely going to help you understand the story, much more so. But they're also their own self-contained stories.
Yeah, they definitely are.
I think after that, um, the scene that got me the most excited, um, the first time I watched it was when he first stood up on the worm.
Oh yeah, and the sound hits and
Ugh.
everybody's going crazy.
It just felt
Yeah.
so ridiculously triumphant. I was just
Yeah.
like, I was so excited for the guy, and I
So
was so happy to see it happen.
that worm was actually way more practical than I was expecting it to be.
Hmm.
Because they built this massive rig just for the worm riding shots, a big
Yeah,
practical rig, and they filmed on it for 3 months, just slotting in people where they could.
that's
So it was
amazing.
largely practical, which is insane to me. And that's another thing about this movie. The CG is done so well, it's
Hmm.
extremely hard to tell what's practical and what's CG.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, they did knocked it out of the park there.
yeah. No, the visuals were
Yeah.
amazing. Keeping in line with visuals, like the show don't tell aspect of this film was one of the things that I noticed, particularly in that scene where this is the first time we're seeing somebody ride a worm up close. And so
Yeah.
Paul has his hooks, like I guess on the edge of the plate of the worm, that like exoskeleton part, and we see it lift up, and it looks like these like like
Yeah.
breather holes or something like that. So when he lifts that plate up, and then we see the worm, like, okay, he comes up instead of diving down. And it's just like they didn't have to tell us that. They just
Yeah, they didn't
showed
have
us.
to expo that, dump that.
And I was
Like,
so happy. I was
yeah.
so happy about that.
Yeah,
I was
because a
just like,
lesser director would have had a scene where Stilgar is just kind of telling him straight up everything.
yeah.
Because I'm sure that Stilgar did have that conversation with him, but it's just so much more satisfying to be able to show it instead of telling it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, 100%. It was just, I felt so happy that I was able to like put that together, just by watching
Yeah,
it. And I didn't have to have somebody
yeah.
tell me that. It was nice.
It's a film that respects its audience enough to meet them at their own level.
Hmm.
Um, Also, one other thing, I don't think I've ever seen like a high budget blockbuster movie that has so much of its dialogue not in English.
Yeah. A lot of this movie was in Fremen. A lot of
A
it.
lot of it. And I was very surprised by that. And whoever the guy who came up with the languages, he's the same guy that worked on Game of Thrones for their
Mhm.
languages. His name's escaping me right now, but he's just so good at what he does.
Yeah, I
Um,
love that Hollywood is starting to do so much more of this. That we're getting more conlangs in our
yeah.
that's constructed language for anyone who doesn't know. That we're getting more conlangs in our blockbusters, and it immerses you in the world so much more.
I mean, and even the kind of the peak of the movie where he's giving his, Messiah speech to the Fremen, like that's all in Fremen.
Hmm.
And I was just shocked that, they had the guts to do that.
Yeah.
Because Timothy Chalamet said in an interview that he did it twice. He did it once in Fremen and once in English. and
Hmm.
then they ended up going with the Fremen version.
Yeah. It felt so powerful,
Oh
and I'm
yeah,
glad they did. I'm glad they did
like
go with the Fremen
that
version.
was one of those scenes I didn't think is that's a big speech from the books. I don't remember exactly how
Mhm,
much of it they changed, as it has been a while since I read the book, but he does give a big speech in the book, and that was one of the moments I didn't know if Charlemagne had the chops to pull off, but
mhm.
man, he nailed it.
It
And
was such a
especially
good
with it
scene.
being in Fremen, like it just hits so much harder because it's in Fremen.
Mhm.
Like,
So, getting back to that, like, fulfillment of the prophecy,
yeah,
um, throughout the movie, we see Paul, he seems very conflicted about the prophecy in the sense of, like, its usefulness. Again, like, I think we mentioned, he knows he needs to use it to get what he wants, but he's still, like, disgusted by it, which I find is, like, a really
yeah.
intriguing dynamic.
And well, a lot of it is also just because he sees what happens when he fulfills it.
Yeah.
Because the spice is beginning to open up his brain even before he takes the water of life.
Mhm.
And, that's got to be a hell of a burden for he's 15 in the books to know that you're going to cause the death of billions.
Yeah. And he's like, "These people worship me. They used to
Yeah.
be my friends. Now they follow me." And
Yeah.
I was just like, "Ugh." Yeah,
Yeah.
that's that
That's,
probably does
that's,
suck.
yeah. I mean, Johnny's the only one who's still normal with him by the end.
Yes, so
And
that was one of my notes, like, throughout the whole movie, Chani is the only person who never, like, other than Irulan, Chani
yeah,
is the only person who never kneels to him.
yeah. And they changed her from the books a good bit as well. But they also changed Stilgar. They kind of brought him in different directions. Like,
Mhm.
they made Chani much more of a skeptic than she is in the books, and they made Stilgar much more of a fanatic.
Yeah,
But I think that change kind of fits because it makes it a lot easier for us
yeah.
to kind of understand what's going on.
I like the
Um,
contrast between
yeah,
those
and
2.
the fanatics in the South is also a movie invention that I think
Mhm.
goes really well because in the books there's not really one group of Fremen that's more fanatical
Yeah.
that I can remember, and setting it up for the fundamentalists in the South, I thought just really up the ante on the theme of fanaticism,
Mhm.
which is a big part of what it's about.
Yeah. So when Paul arrives, at the, like, southern, I guess, temple or lodging, whatever it is,
Yeah,
and he's gotten off the worm now. He starts to part the sea. The way it looks is like this dark figure is walking
yeah,
through this sea of, like, light sandy colored um fabrics, and I'm just like, man, this looks like some really foreboding, like, like,
yeah.
foreshadowing. um
And
I was like, things are about to not be so
yeah.
great.
Hey, it's that whole theme from the books, just terrible purpose.
Yep.
And yeah, I was so happy with how that ended up looking.
Hmm.
Because he is the dark figure that's going to, at the same time, free the Fremen but enslave them to fanaticism.
Yep.
Um,
So, gosh, I got some other notes here. I think moving on to, like, after that speech, and he's got all of the Fremen with him. The
yeah,
war that comes after that, again, visually stunning. It was a lot of fun to watch. But when we get into I guess, the throne room of the Emperor's ship, which when that thing came down, the first time I saw
that
that, I
was
was like,
cool.
oh, just
Yeah,
how it mirrored the entire environment. And
yeah,
then, like,
and
you could even
just
see
the
its
heating up
shadows.
on
Yes.
entering atmosphere.
Yeah, you could
Um,
see its own, like, shadow in its reflection while it was moving over, Arrakeen. I was just like, "Man, this looks so good."
oh wait, we skipped the entire sequence on the Harkonnen planet.
Yes, okay, okay. So let's get back to that. The
um,
Harkonnen planet was
yeah,
dope. It
yeah, that
looks so
was
cool.
yeah, the black sun making everything black and white is such a brilliant thing.
Mhm.
And that scene was actually filmed in infrared and
Yeah.
then recolorized to make it that very milky whites and very void dark blacks,
Mhm.
which I thought was a super interesting choice. And it also like kind of explains why the Harkonnens are so pale.
Yeah. No,
Um,
that whole sequence was, like, such a
and
treat. It was so
I
different from
love
anything I'd
the
seen
the
before.
Rorschach fireworks, kinda.
Yes.
Those were neat looking.
Those stood out to me for
Yeah,
sure, and they had some terrifying, like, creature, whatever things inside that, like, gladiatorial
yeah.
arena. Now, I know
I'm
they were
pretty
just, like,
sure they were.
helmets, but
Yeah,
it still
they were
looked
just
so
the way
off.
they were moving and clicking. It just felt uncomfortable.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
I didn't doubt that there was, like, still some weird, like, monster thing underneath that.
yeah. And now that does come to one of my few nitpicks with the visuals of the film. I
Mhm.
felt like in some of the shots of the crowd at the gladiator match, um, it was just a little bit obvious they made it with a computer.
Yeah.
Um, but other than that, it's just beautiful.
Mhm.
And then Stellan Skarsgård is always great, and Austin Butler did a good job of just playing a psychopath.
Yes.
Um,
Austin Butler, like, just absolutely blew
yeah,
me away, and it was funny because the first time I watched this film, I didn't realize that Austin Butler was in that role, and I actually thought it was, like, the young, like, skinnier or tall, lanky
yeah,
Skarsgård brother. I thought it was him at first just
yeah,
because, like
because he's doing a bit of a Stellan Skarsgård impression, which
yeah.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, I have seen some people say that the voice he speaks in the movie is a bit silly, but
Mhm.
I liked it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it felt very Harkonnen. Bill
Yeah.
Skarsgård, that's the name of the guy I'm trying to think of,
Okay. Yeah.
but
But, um, and then we get more with the Benny Gesserit there, which is always great.
mhm.
Um, impressive of that woman to be able to secure the line after doing the gum jabbar on him because you
Yeah.
know
No, I thought about that, and, she mentioned how he was a sociopath and, like, he
yeah, he
enjoys
loves
pain. He
pain. Yeah,
loves
so
pain, so
maybe he liked the gum jabbar.
yeah, that probably turned him on, if
That could
anything.
have been his version of foreplay.
Yeah, I
But,
wouldn't doubt it. I would not doubt it.
yeah,
Um, so with the Baron, fast forwarding back to after, we've now got our Messiah,
yeah,
and we're in the throne room, and the Baron, he's been cut down,
yeah,
and everybody else has turned their attention to, like, this new makeshift entrance that has been blown into the ship, and he's there dying, and you
and he's
still see
still
him
going for the throne. Yeah,
crawling for the throne. Yes. And it's
yeah,
like, man, what an insight into this man's mindset. Like, as if somehow, if he were able to sit up there, like, he'd be able
yeah.
to command everyone. I mean, I highly doubt that things would have went that way
Oh no, absolutely
for
not.
him. But it's like,
Yeah,
man, he's still driving after that throne.
yeah, because in the book, his whole thing is he doesn't really particularly care if he gets on the throne,
Hmm.
but he wants a Harkonnen on the throne,
Yeah.
which is he makes a deal with Fade Ralpha about making Fade emperor, which
Hmm.
is why he kind of goes more hands off on Arrakis.
Yeah.
Because it's not really explained why he has Robond and
Hmm.
Fade Ralpha take over operations
Yeah.
in the movie, but in the books, it's because of a deal he makes with Fade
Hmm.
concerning putting Fade on the Imperial throne.
Yeah. Which makes sense.
Yeah,
Um, ugh. As one scene that was just absolutely floored me was when I don't know how to refer to her as, but the Bene Gesserit, like the grand, like
yeah, the Reverend
mother,
Mother,
yeah, of
who's
like the whole order, the one who's very clearly giving orders to everyone else.
yeah.
When he silences her and
Oh,
she's just
that's yeah,
stunned. Oh man, I felt like the terror and the
yeah,
power in him. I was just like, man, Paul has come such a long way
yeah.
from where he
I
was.
mean, he's Darth Vader now. He's about to just start genociding everybody.
Yep. And
um,
so then we get to the knife fight. Um,
that was so well choreographed.
so Thade is fighting on behalf of the Emperor here,
Yeah,
and Gurney Halleck, like, why does he take such risks? Because you can tell when he tells him, "Hey, you shouldn't stain your blade on this filth,"
yeah,
or whatever he says. It's like that's not what he really wants to say. He's like, "I'm
no,
scared you're gonna die. Like this guy,
yeah,
this guy might kill you."
yeah. So it's better
Uh,
if he kills me than you.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, and
the
then
stakes for that fight were really
yeah,
high.
and he had to, or he might have lost some face with the Fremen. So
Hmm.
it makes sense why he would choose to do that
Yeah,
instead of just it being a decision of ego. It's a very calculated decision. Um,
For
Yeah,
sure. And when so I mean, he wins that fight. Oh, one of the things is like, he when he brokers a deal with the emperor and is like, I will marry your daughter, solidify my claim. And then we cut to Chani,
yeah.
and I just feel awful for her in this moment.
Oh yeah, no, it's yeah.
Cuz it's like just
But
before that he says, "I just want
I
you to know that I will
yeah,
love
I'm
you."
gonna love you for as long as I breathe.
Yes.
And then he marries another woman like 2 seconds later.
Yeah,
But
but Paul knows like that's his only chance at
yeah, it's
legitimacy
the only
for the
path, the
throne.
golden path
Yep.
is yeah, I think he calls it the golden path in the books.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, he's trying to walk a tightrope. And then the later books, it just goes completely off the rails.
Yeah. So you may be
um,
able to shed some light on this. Before Thade and Paul fight, um, Paul says, "May thy knife chip and shatter." Is that a Harkonnen saying?
no, that's a Fremen saying.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I doubt Theodratha knows what it means. He just, Paul knows what it means though, and he
Okay.
probably just said it back to him.
See, that's what I was
Um,
wondering. I was like, did he say that and then like Thade repeated it back as if like it was his own culture saying, and Paul was just
yeah.
like playing into that
Um,
like, "Hey, we're cousins" thing. But I wasn't sure.
if
I didn't know.
if you remember in the first movie before he kills Jonas,
Uh huh.
um, they both say it there too because it's a Fremen
Okay.
thing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, see,
I
I
forget
forgot about that part.
exactly why they say it. It I think it's explained in the book, but I forget exactly why they say it.
Okay, but after that, another thing that, like, just stood out to me as far as acting, a little bit of directing as well, but when he hands out or puts his hand out to have the emperor, like, kiss his ducal signet,
Yeah.
um, obviously as a form of submission, and he doesn't quite do it yet. He's obviously, like, very leery. He's like, "No, I'm not bending the knee
Yeah.
to this boy." And then he stomps, and then there's
Yeah.
just such force behind it. I was like, "Oh crap, man!" This
Yeah,
dude
I
is like,
thought that was a way better choice than having him say something there, because it was
yes,
just very like, "Do it now."
it was so powerful, and like you said,
Yeah,
it
it
felt like
almost felt
Darth
like when he
Vader.
was using the voice, like
Yes, it did, and it's just another instance of. I love how we're able to just see things happen rather than
yeah,
hear people explain or like talk their way through things. Sometimes we could just see so much in body language in that moment.
yeah, no, it definitely did a lot without saying a lot, um,
And so
which
that brings us to the end of the movie, and the great houses are not willing to accept his
oh, wait, I did
ascendancy
have,
to the throne.
one more note on
Okay.
Chani.
Yeah.
Um, they removed one line that because, in the books, it's made clear
Hmm.
that she's gonna be his concubine, and the marriage to Irulan's just kind of in name only.
Yeah.
Um, and Lady Jessica says something to her that I really like. She says it's something along the lines of history will remember us as wives because she was the concubine to Duke Leto.
Hmm.
So just kind of giving them that shared moment of history will remember us as wives, even though we're not technically.
Yeah.
Um,
I wonder if they'll bring that into the next film or not. I'm curious if Chani like kind of ends up parting ways, or they seem to have
they
set it up for that.
just thinking about what happens in the next book without giving away spoilers,
Hmm.
she's kind of needed to be with him
Okay.
for it to work.
So we shall see.
Um, yeah, because
It
I
could
mean,
it
I,
could
I
all
don't
go off
think
the rails.
this I don't think this is a spoiler. A lot of the books centers around her children with him, so
Okay.
and that's from the very first page. So I'm only spoiling page one.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, a lot of the later books center around the children of Paul and Chani.
Okay.
Because I don't think he has any children with Thirlon. Um, she's very much wife in name only.
Makes
Um,
sense.
yeah,
Yeah, so like this whole like issue of the great houses not accepting his ascendancy begins the holy war at the
yeah,
end. So we're definitely
Oh, I
setting the
love that
stage.
delivery that he has when they're like, "What should we do?" And he just says, "Lead them to paradise," because you can just
Yeah.
feel the pain behind it. That he knows what he's doing is awful,
Yep.
but it's the only way.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, and so now as the viewers, like, our question is, do they reach that paradise, or is this
yep,
paradise really just hell masquerading in, green
yep.
leaves and, a
So,
promising figure? So I don't know.
yeah,
I'm very
I'm
excited to see what
really hoping they
happens.
make a third one. Which
Yes,
it did 80 million domestic this weekend, so
that's a
looks
good
like we're
sign.
on the right track. Yeah,
That's a very good sign. Movies like these need to make a crap ton of money because of
yeah,
their budgets, but they also need to make a crap ton of money so that we can continue to get more movies like these.
yep.
Um, Again, this is a movie that I consider to be like an A+ film. With that, I want to get into my rating for this film. So if you're not familiar with our rating metric, we like to give movies scores based on 10 different criterias, and then we total them up and average them on a scale of 10. So the first category is visual. For this one, I gave it a 10. um, I think, and Nick and I both agree on this. It's just absolutely stunning.
Yep.
Visuals and sound, our next category. Both of those get tens. um, for me, character, the development and the interest, I felt very invested in a lot of these characters, so it's a very high score. But at the same time, as we've mentioned a couple of times, Paul's motivation is like one of the things that just like it does hurt the film a little bit, but just a
Yeah.
little. And so, like, I mean, I personally give it a 8. I might bump it up to a 9. I don't know after I sit on this.
I'm gonna say 9.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's the one where I differ from you.
Okay.
I would give character 9, but other than that, I think we're pretty much in line.
Yeah. And so plot, for similar reasons, a 9, just as far as like the story and the structure of the film. Like everything is just top tier in this. It's a captivating story. Absolutely love it. Acting, 10 out of 10. Everybody brought their A game, had
Oh yeah,
no issues whatsoever in this film. I think it was a treat to get to watch all of these performers like give some of their best work. I think Austin Butler, he is just on a roll with Elvis, and now this role, Thade
yeah.
Rafa.
I've said it repeatedly. COVID is the best thing that ever happened to that man because during COVID, he just basically went into an Elvis craze
Yeah.
and just came out a different actor.
Yeah. No, God bless him for it, because
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to the rest of his career, because I'm sure he's gonna have
Oh
some
yeah.
absolute bangers coming out. I want to see Masters of the Air because he looks fantastic in that too.
Yeah.
Very excited for him and his future. And then Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya.
Timothy
th-
Chalamet keeps getting cast in things where I ask myself, why did they cast Timothy Chalamet for that? And then he knocks it out of the park.
Yes. So, on that note, the first Chalamet movie that I watched, which I think everybody needs to watch, to me it's required viewing if you want to be like a cinema junkie, is The King on
Yeah,
net.
on
It's a
Netflix.
Netflix
That
original.
I
It
really like
is
that one.
such a good movie.
It
Absolutely
has some
amazing.
of my absolute favorite combat
Hmm.
in any like medieval set film
Yeah.
because it's one of the few movies that remembers armor blocks things. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, a sword's not going to go through a piece of plate like butter.
Hmm. So
Uh,
yeah, you guys need to check that out if you want more great acting,
Yeah,
like we saw in this film from Timothy. Technical, the effects, edits, pacing, 10 out of 10. I saw no issues with this.
I had some slight issues with pacing,
Okay,
um, but not enough to drop at a point.
gotcha. For me, this film felt very different from the last one in the sense like I had no issues with the last one as far as pacing. I did feel the weight of how long the last movie was. This one did not feel as long, even though
No,
they're nearly identical run times. Um, it seemed to move along quicker because it was again the pacing was just faster, and there was a lot
Yeah.
more in this
And
too.
there's a
I
lot
felt
more
like
action too. And
yes,
normally when there's more action, you're gonna feel it's faster.
yep. It was
But
very jam packed for sure.
my slight pacing issue would be I feel like you could have spent a little bit more time in the back half. But
Hmm.
that might have been, for budget because they didn't have the budget to film as many war shots.
Yeah,
Um,
the war was very quick.
yeah,
Now that I think about
that
it,
was my one pacing issue.
yeah.
Which in the book it happens very fast as well.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm not going to nitpick. I'm not even going to dock them a point for it. I'm just going to point it out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Themes. So, like, what does this say about life? The Messiah theme in this film, and whether or not to follow people, those are very strong. Nick, I know you had some other themes that stood out to you.
Yeah, just kind of that whole concept of terrible purpose and,
Hmm.
you know, going down the only path you can. Because it's always interesting when a character can see the future,
Hmm.
seeing what they do with it and how it changes them. It makes Paul take a dark turn um, and even being able to see the past completely because Lady Jessica becomes a very different character when she can see.
Yeah.
Um, and and it almost becomes in a society without computers, people become more computer-like, kind of.
Hmm.
That's a big theme in it for me, and yeah, I really enjoyed the themes of the movie though.
I like how we're constantly exploring the idea of, there is this prophecy
Yeah,
that the Fremen have been like clinging to, but it was planted by the Bene Gesserit. So like, is it legitimate? Is it not? I
yeah,
mean,
and
it was like planted, if I'm not like centuries before.
oh yes, basically as soon as the Fremen showed up on Arrakis,
Yeah.
because the Bene Gesserit have been doing their thing for a very long time.
And yet Paul somehow
Fulfills it,
like
yeah,
just fulfills all of these
to a
notes of the
T.
prophecy.
Yeah. So it's a known false prophecy, but also if it happens, then can it be false?
Yeah, and it's
Um,
like some of the things, like I don't think he was necessarily even intentionally trying to fulfill. He just did.
yeah,
Others very clearly, like he was doing it because he needed to.
yeah,
But it's such a fascinating concept to explore to
yeah.
me.
Uh,
And with that word, concept. So was this a fun idea? Is this a fresh idea? Now this is based on the novels by Frank
Frank
Herbert,
Herbert, yeah.
Dune, which widely regarded as one of the greatest sci-fi epics of all time. Um,
I've seen it described as when sci-fi grew up,
yeah.
because it takes a much darker and
Hmm.
you know there's a lot of intricate details to the book
Yeah.
that most sci-fi books before that were more fun and lighthearted.
And so these
Um,
came out in the 60s, right? Uh,
yes, I
in
believe
the first one?
63, 64.
Let me see. Dune book release. Get an exact date. 1965.
Okay. Yeah, I
So
knew it
that
was
was that
somewhere
was
in the
the
mid
first book.
60s. Yeah.
But still, I mean, yeah, that would make sense to me because a lot of sci-fi that we see before then is very Flash Gordon-y,
Yeah.
very serialized, comical. Um, yeah,
And
Dune is peak sci-fi.
oh yeah, and you can see how much influence it's had on things like Star Wars and
Hmm.
basically any sci-fi made after it is at least somewhat influenced by Dune.
Yep,
So yeah,
Tatooine
it's a
directly
yeah,
inspired by Dune.
Tatooine is Dune. But minus the worms. But no, we got the Sarlacc, so yeah, there is worms. Um
Well, we see that
yeah.
crate dragon skeleton when they first get onto when the droids first get onto Tatooine. Um, out of the escape pod, and I feel like that might be a nod to the worms.
It could be. I mean, I
Be-
imagine George likes the book
yeah.
probably. I mean, yeah.
But yeah,
But,
concept. I give it a 10 out of 10. I love
yeah.
this world. I'm still exploring it through the novel section or the novels, but I'm
Now,
absolutely enthralled with this
apparently
world.
they are going to be doing a Benny Jesuit TV series on
Ooh,
HBO.
that sounds
Um,
exciting.
yeah, I mean that could be good. I'm a bit worried if Denny's not in charge though,
Yeah.
because I feel like that could. be not good because you need
I
someone really smart writing that.
Yeah, I'd be okay
Like,
if he's not directing, but I
yeah,
really hope that he has input,
yeah,
especially as an executive like producer level, like shot calling.
yeah. Um, Yeah, because that would be my one fear is like you need somebody who's really, really smart to write that.
Hmm.
Because you can only write characters as smart as you are. It's a general rule.
Yep.
And the Benny Jesuits are just such intricate planners
Hmm.
and just do things with a lot of subtlety
Yep.
that I think a lot of writers could just absolutely flub that.
Yeah, that I feel like that's going to be quite a task to pull off, but hopefully
Yeah.
they get the best of the best. I mean, HBO definitely has the money for it.
Yeah, they and you know, HBO does have a fairly good track record.
Hmm.
Um, outside of Game of Thrones season 8, but
Yeah. All right, and then lastly, we've got rewatch and impression. So for me right now, the rewatch value is a 9 out of 10. The only reason I dock it a point is because it is a very long movie. I couldn't
yeah,
see myself like just sitting down to watch this without like planning for it ahead of time.
yeah,
Because it's a good 3 hour chunk of your day.
hmm
I would have to like know like, well, yeah, I'm not doing anything for the next 4 hours, so I'm just gonna sit down and watch this.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I still very rewatchable. I loved it. I
yeah.
mean, I saw it back to back days.
I've seen it 3 times since it came out on Thursday, and it's
Yeah.
Sunday night now.
Yeah. So like I no issues watching this over and over. I think it's fantastic, easy to watch again. Impression. So the impact it had on me, I I feel like this needs to sit for a little bit longer.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
hard to give impression until you've like had some time to let it stew.
Yeah. I
Um,
I tend to rate this on, am I still thinking about this movie a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later? Those are the kind of movies that get a 10 out of 10 for me.
yeah,
As of right now, I don't know that I'm quite gonna get there with it, but I do have it at an 8, maybe even a 9 out of 10, but right now I've got it at an 8. So,
I would say for me it's a 9.
yeah.
Um, but then again, it's also just hard to tell until you've let it sit. So maybe
Mhm.
we'll go back and update that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want a comprehensive list of our ratings, join us in our Discord where we talk about
Mhm.
movies and send memes and sometimes I make pizza and put pictures in
Yeah.
there.
His
Um,
pizzas are very good looking.
yeah,
But our total comes out to, for me, a 9.3, and I think for Nick, a 9.5,
yeah,
which, obviously, as you can tell, this is a very, very good movie, at least in our eyes. We highly recommend you guys go see it. We're pushing an hour now.
yep.
Um,
And we
I'm
thought this was going to be a short episode.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be a little bit shorter, but it's
Yeah,
long movie, fantastic content, plenty to talk about. But
yeah,
we would love to know what you guys think about it. If you could just drop us a comment in the comment section, let us know what you think about it. Come
yeah.
find us on Discord. Nick, any parting words?
Um, no, not really. It's a good movie. That's
Yep.
about it.
My last thing, if you're still here, um, I'm so impressed with Denis' track record. I hope to God that he has something up his sleeve original and unique to him in the sci-fi or fantasy world, some story that he has created. I
Yeah.
want to see what is in this man's
Oh,
brain.
I would absolutely love that. I would
Oh,
be in the theater opening day.
he's absolutely knocked it out of the
Yeah,
park with, the world of Blade Runner and now
yeah.
Dune. I cannot wait to see. I'm so hopeful that he has something
He's
original
got to have
to give to
something
the
that he's
world.
been cooking on.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you can't be that creative and not have something.
Yeah, I mean, we got stories
Yeah.
from him, but I want to see like an immersive world,
Yeah, I
something
want to
that's
see
just
something that's more on the scale of Dune.
yes,
Um,
like Game of Thrones, Star Wars, Dune,
yeah.
something like that. But all
Lord
right,
knows we need it right now.
yeah, we need more good stories.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and
Thanks,
if you
guys.
stuck with us this long, we really appreciate it.
Yep.
Have a great time watching more movies. Bye.
Yep.